Right, good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. I'm Councillor Barry Pierpoint. I'm the chairman of the committee. Unfortunately, my vice chairman is not here at the moment, so we will move on. Before we move into the preliminary items of this evening's agenda, I need to run through some housekeeping details. I'd like to remind everyone in attendance this evening that this meeting is being streamed live on YouTube. Would all persons addressing this meeting please do so through the microphone system at all times. This meeting is being recorded. Please ensure that the microphones are turned off after speaking. Any members of the public in attendance, which they are, the restroom facilities are available for the ladies on this floor and halfway down the stairwell for gentlemen. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, officers will escort everybody out of the building to the nearest fire safety point in the car park. Please be advised that abuse or intimidation of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone who is deemed to breach this requirement will be warned and asked to refrain. If the behaviour persists, they will be asked to leave the meeting. Now we'll move to part one of the agenda, the preliminaries. Any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chairman, we've received apologies from councillors Paul Gleeson and Chris Mountain.
Thank you, Amanda. Does any member wish to declare any interest in respect of any of the items on the agenda? No? Thank you. Do I have the permission to sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of January 2025? Agreed? Yes, lovely. Where's my minutes I've got to sign? Here. Sorry.
Chairman, just one sort of administrative point. Neither myself nor Gideon are mentioned as attending the meeting on the minutes. It's probably good practice to have us on there, I think, just to clarify that was in.
Well, I think it's most important you're on there. That's what you're here for.
Yeah.
You know, so we must make sure we get those put back on the meeting.
Apologies, that's an oversight on my part. They will be amended.
Thank you for bringing that matter up anyway. So yes, very kind of you. Right, I'm looking for these things on it. There they are. Right. Just sign these and we'll move on. There you are. How much datum as well? Okay. There you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. Actions. Are there any outstanding actions from the last meeting?
Chairman, the action sheets from the meetings on the 18th of November and the 27th of January were circulated with the agenda. There are no outstanding actions.
Okay. Did anybody not receive the actions? And does anybody want to question anything on the actions while we're on this section? Yes, by all means, carry on.
Thank you. Again, these are just administrative points, really, but I do question a bit whether we should be marking matters as complete when the due date hasn't actually come round yet. So page 11, action point 3, for example.
Before its date.
It's complete it's complete in terms of an update being provided, with the whistleblowing policy being updated as a partnership-wide document. So it's complete as far as following up on the action, but obviously we can't do anything further until after that. Okay,
fair enough. I do have one other question. Sorry, it is page 12 on action point 7. So this goes back to the point about the 5 bank accounts and the bank reconciliations. I'm not clear when the follow-up audit is due to be complete and reported on. Obviously, this is a matter that we have discussed before, and I think the meeting was sort of keen that this is resolved as soon as possible. So it would be good to get a sense of when this is likely to be signed off.
And then Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So when one of the further items is the annual internal audit plan for 25-26, and the follow-up is in there along with the quarter when we're planning to do it. So we should come to that.
Thank you. Any other points on the actions before we move on? Right. Are there questions from the members of the public?
There are none, Chairman.
Thank you. Well, that concludes the preliminaries. We'll now move to part 2 of the agenda items. Can I just make it clear that everybody who speaks and presenting a report, would you make sure if you're talking about a specific topic or item that you give us the page number that you're referring to so we can follow you rather than having people in here looking with blank faces, if you don't mind. Right, so we go to agenda item part 2, external audit plan and strategy for the year ending the 31st of March. I'm going to call upon, is Rosie joining us? Oh,
yeah,
you're there, Rosie.
I'm here. Yeah.
Welcome
Thank
aboard.
Thank you. Yeah,
Over to
thank
you.
you. Yeah, so I'm stepping in for James Boyle today as he can't be here. But this report outlines our risk assessment and planned external audit approach for the year ended 31st March 2025 and also includes our value for money commentary. This is the final version of our audit plan, and I just thought it's worth noting that we didn't present a final version of this document until October last year. So hopefully that provides some assurance to the committee that we're returning to a normal audit cycle, and want to thank the finance team for all their help so far in aiding us to get to this position. I'll take the report as read, but in terms of highlights, there's no significant change in our audit approach to the prior year. Materiality for the financial statements has been set at 1.2 million for the council, but we report all misstatements above our audit reporting threshold of 60,000, and that's outlined on page 23 of the pack. On pages 25 to 29 of your pack outlines our significant audit risks. There's been no change in the significant audit risks or our audit response from the previous year. For our value for money risk assessment, this is on page 39 to 53, but we have not identified any significant risks. On page 54 of the pack, we have made one new performance improvement point, and this is in relation to ensuring formal record of key decisions made in the identification of efficiencies within the budget setting and monitoring process. A formal management response is being sought for this and will be included within our final year-end reporting to the committee, along with the due date as well. On page 55, we've re-included a recommendation to formalise the efficiency programme. Just to flag to members, this was identified and reported to the committee as part of the 23-24 audit process, but has a due date of 30th of September. So this is not yet due, but we've re-included as the recommendation remains relevant for the 24-25 period of audit. On pages 56 to 58, we've followed up on the performance improvement observations that were raised as part of the 23-24 audit. And on page 57, just to flag, we've marked the budget holder report's recommendation as not implemented, as one out of the two sampled was not signed by the budget manager. And then finally, just to draw your attention to page 61, which is our audit timetable and shows our final fieldwork to commence in July. And I'm very happy to report to you that we're on track this year. And as I said at the beginning, returning to a normal audit cycle.
Is that it, Rosie?
Yeah, that's everything. So happy to pause there for questions or comments.
Right, we'll take some questions from the committee. Any questions from anybody? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask on page 6 of this report, which is page 26 of our agenda, it mentions about the valuations of land and buildings, and it specifically mentions a DRC valuation. I was just hoping we could get a bit of information about whether we have to use this DRC model, because it seems to be in this report you're mentioning that it can be uncertain. So it'd be good to get some clarification on that.
So the method that has to be used by the valuer is prescribed by the Code of Local Government Accounting Practice. So it's dependent on the type of asset. So there isn't a choice as such, because we would challenge if the valuer used a different model, for example. With the nature of valuations, they just tend to be uncertain due to that estimation uncertainty element. in particular there, what we've outlined, the obsolescence, the BCIS indices and location factors. So unfortunately, I don't think it's something that the council can get around.
Okay, if that's the rules, that's the rules. Yeah. Anything else from yourself?
Yeah, just a clarification. I'm sure this will probably be something the officers could clarify on as well. Is on page 8 under the management override of controls. It mentions the planned response, which is fine, but I think it would be good to get some more details on how we will mitigate this further. It seems to be a bit vague. But yeah, it'd be good to get an update on that, I think, for a future time.
Which page are we on?
Sorry, this is page 8 of the report and page 28 of the agenda.
Okay.
So just to provide, sorry, Chair, just to provide a brief response to that question. So the management override of controls is a presumed significant audit risk that we as auditors have to raise and address. So in every single organisation, you will see this as a standard risk. What we've bulked out at the side, on the left-hand side, is that we've not identified any specific additional risks of management override relating to this audit. So this is very much a standard risk. And there's nothing kind of further that's flagging that.
Yep, no, thank you very much for that clarification.
Are there any other questions from, yes, Councillor Gilbert?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for reminding me. Yeah, just a bit of clarification on page 42. The efficiency programme we've obtained is a long list of potential efficiencies to be explored, which are allocated to the lead officers. And it goes on to say, this therefore it cannot be seen if savings are falling behind the plan. Is that still the case? Is that being rectified at all? You may have already addressed it in your earlier preamble.
So for us, that is a point that's still outstanding. So it kind of feeds through into the follow-up of the recommendation of the 23-24 formalisation of the efficiency plan. So management kind of gave themselves a due date of September 2025 for that to be fully implemented, and we are still awaiting for that action to have passed and happened. So at present, we still feel there's not a formal plan in place.
Any more questions? Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So my colleague and I have some questions for Rosie. So the first one I have, Rosie, just on page 19 on materiality. I just wanted to know, you have explained that in the report to some extent, but I wondered if you could just unpick a little more as to why you've chosen the materiality percentage that you have. It would just be helpful, I think, just to understand that a bit further.
Yeah, so when we calculate materiality, we think about the use of the financial statements and what monetary value would kind of influence their decisions when reading the financial statements. So when we choose our benchmark, which is forecasted expenditure, there is a range that we have to sit between. And this year we've gone for 2.6%, which I believe is higher than last year. So last year we went for a lower threshold, partly because it was a first year audit. This year we're a bit more confident in terms of what's in the accounts, the stable environment that the council has operated in. And we didn't really find any significant issues in the prior year. So I think that 2.6 is where we landed.
Yes, okay, no, that's really helpful. Thank you very much indeed. That's just really helpful just to sort of have that on the record and sort of explained. I think I do have a couple more points and then I'll come on to Gideon. So page 42, and this is similar to the issue that Councillor Gilbert raised. So this is about an apparent lack of governance in keeping records of meetings. Can I just be clear? So no meeting was taken of a budget setting or an efficiency finding meeting with councillors. Was there no note as well of an SLT meeting when those recommendations were reviewed? I just want to be clear about what we're addressing here.
So from the inquiries that I had with management, they were able to provide evidence that a meeting was held. So I could see a diary invite or a agenda, but there wasn't actually any formal minutes or meeting notes that I could see from that meeting.
Can I just ask those involved in these meetings and taking minutes, are we now taking minutes of meetings? Are we recording things properly for the record? Anybody like to give me an answer? James? Please go. Yeah.
So at all meetings of senior leadership team, we do take notes. So I can talk about kind of conversations that take place there. Every meeting is now the short notes taken alongside the agenda. So we do capture that record of what's discussed at those meetings. Yes.
So we are now doing that. We haven't done in the past according to this.
No, well, we have done it for quite some time across the organisation. It may just be a one-off or it hasn't happened here and no evidence has been found. But on the whole, notes are taken at senior leadership team meetings that take place on a weekly basis.
Okay, thank you. Are happy with that? Carry on.
So my final question before we go on to Gideon, this is about page 53 and contract monitoring, and it does sort of come on from much the same issue that I raised at the previous meeting. So this is about the performance of the leisure contract with Parkwood Leisure. And I think actually it probably isn't for you, Rosie, it probably is for officers. So I just want to be quite clear about what measures we're currently taking to ensure that the contractual requirements are being fulfilled. So are there KPIs that are monitored? Are there regular review meetings with the provider? I mean, we're about halfway through, I think, the contract. It's a 3-year contract, I believe. So are there procedures in place to ensure a seamless transition? Obviously, I have in mind that there have been issues with other leisure contracts locally. And I think this is something that we do need to be quite clear about.
Can anybody give us any steer on that one at all? Can we make a note then so we can have that taken further to somebody else to give us an answer? That needs an action on that one. Clearly nobody's got the answers in the meeting here. So we'll take that further up the ladder and see if we can get some answers on that one. Carry on. Any more questions?
Yes, a couple. On page 40, it's mentioned about slippage of £24.4 million. Is that due to the Rosegarth Square development, or are there any other factors in that?
Anybody in the finance team or Rosie, anybody can give us any answers on that one, please? Finance team, anybody? Yes, Samantha.
I'd have to refer back to the cabinet papers that the 24.4 million refers to give more details. So if we can take it as an action, I can provide further details to the next meeting. I appreciate that.
If you can't give the answers today, not a problem. I'd rather you go away and get the answers for us rather than just make something up. I know people don't, but I don't want that. I want the truth. I want the real stuff. All right. Thank you very much, Samantha. That's very kind of you. Gideon.
Then also on page 48, I believe it is. Then there's mention about the manager had not signed their report. Was that report completely disregarded then, or was there any inquiry made into why that manager hadn't signed the report? Or I'd just be interested in a bit of background to that.
Rosie, do you know whose report it was, or do you get any information?
So I think from the pre-meet, this was an action that the finance team were going to take away in terms of why that hadn't been signed. I don't know whether they have a response.
Yes, Samantha.
So to confirm, so these are the monthly monitoring or quarterly monitoring meetings that the finance team hold with budget managers to create the forecast for the financial outturn or the financial quarterly monitoring report. So we acknowledge that on this occasion this report hasn't been signed, but the meeting has been taking place. It's just the formal recognition of the output from that meeting. So we are working with Section 151 to ensure we have a compliant and effective solution going forwards. We're also looking at use of technology such as Copilot to transcribe these meetings and also to generate an action plan from that one. So we are looking to embed that further to sort of make sure that is an embedded action for 25-26.
Go on, Brendan. Don't want to mention anything? Are you happy with that? Yeah, just two sides of the coin there. I want to make sure that we're okay with that one. Well done. Okay, let's any more questions for Rosie on this report?
You want to speak? I think the gentleman at the back want to speak.
I can't really speak on that. Unfortunately, the public can't speak. You have to put the questions in 2 days in advance. So I'm sorry about that. We can't take any questions from you. But bear that in mind for the future. If you come to any meetings, or want to come to a meeting, make sure you tell people if you've got a question to bring it 2 days before the meeting, so we've got it in front of us. Okay? Happy with that? Thank you. Right. So no more questions for Rosie. No, on that report. Thank you, Rosie, and give our regards to James. I'm sorry he's not here tonight to join us, but send in our best wishes. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Are you stopping with us, or are you disappearing? I can't
I'm
live
staying
read,
on.
but you're staying on. Well done.
Yeah.
I'm pleased you are, just in case we've got a few more problems to answer. Thank you. Right, let's move on. The committee is asked to note and comment on this report. Everybody happy to take this as noted? We've made a note of all the comments. We've also made a note of the 1 or 2 things that we want answers back to on the action points. Is everybody happy? Noted? Thank you. Right, we're going to the item 2 then of the agenda. Financial statements, accounting policies. Start on page 67, and I'm going to ask Nicole to present that report. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Chair. So this report starts on page 67 of your agenda pack and details the accounting policies relating to 24-25. This is an annual report presented each year to committee, and the recommendation is for the committee to review and agree the policies. So the accounting policies don't tend to change each year. However, Boston has got one substantial change for 24-25 following the introduction of a new accounting standard, IFRS 16 leases. This supersedes the previous standard. So this requires that the council is to recognise a right of use asset with a corresponding liability on the balance sheet for all leases with a term of more than 12 months, unless the asset is of a low value. So this update is on page 81 of your agenda pack. As part of this, PSPS are working with an external Treasury advisor to assist with the accounting entries and the disclosure notes for the financial statements, which will be presented at the next committee. As there are no further changes to last year's report, I don't tend to go through this in detail, but happy to take any questions.
What is the low value? You mentioned about low value. What is that low value? Just for clarification.
Yeah, so the low value as per SITFA is stated around about 10k, but we can look at that as per council. So that is something that PSPS are working with the section 151 to find that appropriate value. And also our external auditors can challenge that value as well. So we're working to determine the appropriate one for Boston.
So we'll use the 10k as a marker then, shall we, for the time being? Yeah,
so 10k is used on the basis that it falls in line with our capital expenditure of our de minimis level, with also being 10k.
Okay, thank you. So on that one, does anybody want to mention anything at all before we move on? Any questions? Mike?
A couple of dots by one particular item on page 72. It's really out of curiosity, I think, more than anything else. And it relates to issues around depreciation. It's just below the 3rd bullet point. The council is not required to raise council tax. And I just wonder, again, in relation to your comment about de minimis figures and numbers, whether there's any sort of figures in relation to that particular item there about depreciation, whether the council are actually sort of managing to cover depreciation, or whether we're in a situation where some of our assets are depreciating and there's no finance available to cover that depreciating cost.
Thank you. Yes. So depreciation is one of those accounting complex adjustments that we do. So as part of the financial statements, you'll see the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, and there you'll see that true cost. So certain things like depreciation, you can't charge to the taxpayer. So we reverse that out as part of our local government accounting through the movement in reserves. So as part of that, council tax isn't used specifically to fund depreciation as such or evaluation, but part of assets coming on the fixed asset register, we work with our valuers and the asset manager as such to determine what that appropriate useful life will be, what they expect that depreciation charge to be over a period of time. As part of the actual financial statements, you'll see a breakdown of what our, bracket is that we work with. But it's mainly done on a case-by-case basis for new assets coming on board and determining what the appropriate life would be that we will then charge across those next financial years.
Happy with that, Councillor Gilbert?
I think it seems to suggest that we actually do cover the depreciation issues on an ongoing basis, basically. So yes, I'm happy with that.
Any other questions before we move on? No more questions. Right. The recommendation is the Audit and Governance Committee review and agree the accounting policies 24-25 at Appendix 1. Do we have a proposer? Councillor Danny. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Scoot. Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. We move on. Item 3 is the Q3 Treasury Report. I'm going to ask Sean to present that for us. Sean, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. You have before you the Q3 Treasury Report for 2024-25 on page 91. And the purpose of the report is to provide members with an update on Treasury management performance and activity to ensure best practice is maintained. Attached to Appendix A is the Q3 Treasury Report, and that is in respect of the Treasury Management Strategy Statement and Annual Investment Strategy. I propose to go through the main report, which starts on page 100. The report is Q3 for quarter ending 31st of December 2024. The SIPFA Code of Practice on Treasury Management recommends that members be updated on Treasury Management activities at least quarterly. This report therefore ensures that the Council is implementing best practice in accordance with the Code. Paragraph 2 provides quite a lot of detail in relation to the economic update, which has been provided by our external Treasury advisors, MUFG, formerly Link Group. I don't propose to go through that, but the key points are that economic growth, gross domestic product was flat, earnings has increased in the quarter by 4.4%, inflation is running at 2.6%, and the Bank of England base rate has gone down to 4.75%. Paragraph 4 refers to the annual investment strategy. This was approved by Council on the 4th of March, and that set the Council's priorities in relation to investments as security of capital, followed by liquidity, and then finally yield in that order. Investment rates have remained relatively elevated during the third quarter of 2024-25, but are expected to fall back in due course during 2025 when the MPC loosens monetary policy more substantially. The table on page 107 provides a breakdown of the Council's investments as at the 31st of December, and you'll see that they total for just under £40.4 million, compared with level 2, quarter 2 of £31.7 million. The main reason for the increase being additional grant being received. The table on page 109 provides a breakdown of the Council's property fund investments, and the first column you'll see there in relation to purchase costs shows purchase cost of £17.3 million, and the net asset value of those assets at the 31st of December was just over £15.1 million, therefore a reduction of just under £2.2 million. And the quarter 3 change is there's been £100,000 increase in comparison with the quarter 2 figure, and that's therefore a £140,000 increase since the end of the last financial year. The table on page 111 provides a breakdown of how we're doing in relation to investment income in comparison with budget. And you'll see from the third column showing the variance for quarter 3, we have a favourable variance on investment income of just over £500,000 above budget. And the forecast outturn as at the 31st of December was that this outturn favourable variance would increase to just over £700,000. And I can confirm base provisional figures for the end of the financial year shows that that is likely to be around £714,000. Paragraph 5 refers to borrowing. The Council, as you know, has £1 million worth of external borrowing, and as that is at a fixed rate, the borrowing costs are expected to be in line with budget. Paragraph 6 provides the summary of the net treasury position against budget and the forecast outturn. And as the premature repayment of borrowing discount and also the borrowing costs are fixed, they are exactly in line with budget. Therefore, the forecast outturn as at quarter 3 is the same as previously stated as £703,000. Paragraph 7 refers to the compliance with Treasury and prudential indicators. These are shown at Appendix 1A, which I don't propose to go through in any detail. The Director of Finance reports that no difficulties are envisaged for the current or future years in complying with these recommendations, in complying with these indicators. The recommendation is that members receive and review the contents of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. As usual, a very comprehensive report. Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Gillian.
It's been mentioned before, the paragraph 5, the borrowing the logo. Did we ever get a figure on how much it would cost to pay that off? Or I know it's excessive, but do we actually know what that figure would be, please?
Yeah, the last time we asked, which was approximately 3 weeks ago, the £1 million, there would be a premium of just over £800,000 to repay. So we would have to pay just over £1.8 million.
Happy with that? Well done. Oops, sorry. Oh, Councillor Gilbert.
Yeah, I'll just shove my 4 pence worth in again.
Make it 5 pence worth and we'll be more interested.
Very impressive, actually. I mean, for a council our size, we do very well, I think, to ensure our finances are in a strong position that they are in. I just wonder, in relation to BlackRock UK Property Fund and real estate funds, how much exposure there is to the commercial market within those funds? Do you know?
I would have to take that question away. Obviously, I don't know that in detail in relation to any of the funds, but what I can do is I can have a look at their quarterly report and find out what the breakdown of the asset class for that BlackRock assets. It will be split between things like warehousing, offices, student accommodation, that sort of type of thing. So yes, I'll take that away and provide the answer by way of an update. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gilbert, and and on the action points. And thank you very much, Sean, on that one. Anybody else want to ask Sean any more questions? Any more? Yes, Councillor. You go on then, off you go.
Thank you, Sean, for the explanations and the information given. The only thing we know actually that there is a war of tariffs, and Councillor Gilbert just mentioned, the BlackRock, and there is a downfall of the dollar yesterday. It was a lot of things on the market going on. So is there any risk for our assets or our investment probably in the near future with what's going on now in the world? Because everybody believes that there is a big change happening around the world.
Yes, in relation to the current global economic position, what we have seen as a result of the American situation and the war, etc. Certainly in America, what's happening is the dollar pound exchange rate. The pound is getting stronger and stronger, which is good for imports, but not good for exports, etc. And also what that has happened is we've seen the long-term PWLB borrowing rates and the short-term PWLB borrowing rates have gone up where we were expecting them to go down gradually over a period of time. But at the moment, the expectation is that tariffs, etc., are likely to have a adverse effect in relation to inflation because costs are rising, etc. So it's likely that the cuts in interest rates are probably going to take longer to feed through, which is, as an investing council, that is good for the council because if interest rates remain higher, what you'll find is you'll achieve your budget in relation to investments and exceed that if those budget rates remain higher. But the converse to that is that if costs are going up, obviously, as far as all your expenditure items, fuel, etc., those costs are likely to increase. So one may counter the other, but it's difficult to say whether that's going to be the increase in costs is going to be outweighed by the increase in interest rate investments that you get.
Any other questions? Any other questions from the committee before we move on? Right, so it's recommended that the members of the Audit and Governance Committee receive and review the contents of this report, which we attached on Appendix 1. Do we have a proposer, please? Councillor Gilbert. Seconder, please. Councillor Danny. Right, we'll move to all in favour? Vote, yes. Carried, well done. Thank you, Sean. Excellent. Right, Q3 risk report. I'm going to call upon Suzanne now to present that for us. Thank you, Suzanne. Over to you.
But it's fine. Just needed pressing a few more times. Can you hear me all right? Thank you. So this is the update on the risk register as at the end of December 2024. The usual quarterly risk report. There's two parts to the report. The first part I'll go through as usual, and then the second part, as committee requested, a bit more information about staff wellbeing. So we have colleagues who'll join in after we've done the first part of the report. So just draw your attention to page 120 in the pack, paragraph 2.1. We've had a new addition to the template for the risk register. This is something that came out of both external and internal audit, asking for more focus on the way that we track the actions that are if this doesn't work, then it's me. Yes, so we've added a new column to the risk register, and this is the action tracker RAG rating, red, amber, green. So wherever we've got an action that needs to be treated, and we've always had that column in there to show treated, there needs to be an action next to it that needs to happen, and next to that is the date when that action will take place. So if that date is in there and is not yet reached, then it's green. If there are any action dates that aren't in there yet, or any that have gone past their date, then they'll be amber for 1 or 2 reporting cycles, and then they become red. And then it's very easy for committee and for the leadership team to see where there are any issues with the action tracking. So hopefully that's a nice addition to the register, easy for you to be able to see if there are any issues on there. There are a couple of ambers at the moment, but they'll be addressed for Q4. So I expect that we won't have any ambers in the next report. If we do, then that'll be easy for you to see. It does also mean that that table that you see at the bottom of page 120 and over onto the next page has a lot of updates in there. So you'll see that the treatment and action has been reviewed on the first one, for example. Target risk scores have been reviewed, actions have been added. So it has really helped in practice to have a good review of the risks and some focus on those actions in there. At the top of page 121, you'll see there that the introduction of extended producer responsibility, the risk has reduced, so the direction of travel is down, and that's due to the government funding that's been announced. I think we were waiting for that to come through before we could reduce the risk, and that's now down. There's also a risk just below that around the depot. It's still high for Q3, but in Q4 we'll have an update for you on that one, which will show that that risk is also reducing. And then right at the bottom of that table, you'll see there's a new risk around LGR. Things are moving very quickly. So we have the risk in there from Q3, but again in Q4 that will be updated, and all of the risks are being reviewed in light of what may happen with local government reform. And then on page 124 at the top there is a paragraph around staff wellbeing risk. So before we jump onto that, if there are any questions about the risks themselves before we move on.
I'd just like to ask a question about all the high risks. I mean, what are we doing to try and get those down from high to something medium or low? I mean, there's no explanation on here about what's going to be happening or what's going to be, what we're trying to do or who's handling what. I'd be interested to know, what activity we're carrying out to get those high risks down. I know sometimes it's not always possible, but I'd like to have an understanding of really what we are doing as a council.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, there are two forms really. There are some which are high risk, like the finance is a high risk, the budget risk, it always has been and continues to be, because a lot of the risk comes externally. So the things that you do, such as having the committee, having the monitoring and that in place, keeps it at the level that it is, and that mitigation is to keep things balanced. But it would be unlikely for that risk to reduce beyond a high. It is a high risk, and there's not very much we can do about that in the circumstances. But some of the others, the ones we've talked about around the depot, there are specific actions in the risk register in the appendix that set out what we will do to bring that risk down, and then the target risk shows how it reduces. So in the future reports, you'll be able to see clearly there was some work that needed to be done on the depot, the lease signed, and that's been completed. I don't want to speak for Victoria, she'll jump in if I'm getting this wrong. And some of the other risks, there are specific actions in there that you can track. But it is right that some of those risks remain high. What we can do is put some time in to go through the register in detail. We used to do that, so that it's a bit of a training session as well with the committee outside of the meeting, if that would be useful to go through line by line.
It would be, yes. I'd like to see some safety nets somewhere on this system so that I can see that we're not going to fall down a big hole. So that's where I'm coming from. What is the safety nets with all these high things? And I'd like to see some information there that says this is happening, that's happening, we're doing this, we're doing that. Giving me some assurance that we're actually doing something about something, especially high. And I know you said it's not always possible, but at least let's try and let's get those high risks down if we can, or give me some demonstration that what's happening. Brandon, sorry.
No, it is Brendan, Chair. Sometimes my dentist calls me Bernard, and I don't mind at all, so it's fine. I thought I'd just try and throw a little light on this matter of the budget risk, and I think we need to perhaps in the period ahead try and break this budget risk down a little into its components, because I think if we're able to do that. For Suzanne, what we'll find is that some elements will be highly cyclical. So you'll have a high risk before you've balanced the medium-term financial plan looking forward. But once you have balanced it, actually that risk falls away. And you then move on to looking at other aspects of the control environment, which is the quality of financial control. So in other words, are set budgets being delivered within target? And we know that across the partnership, and in Boston at the moment, there are forecast underspends in year. So it's a question of assembling a detailed perspective on each of these tranches of risk and then looking at the whole thing. And I think we're able to do that as we move forward. And so hopefully in the periods ahead, you'll have a more sophisticated reference set there for the budget risk in particular. But that might also play out in some other areas of the risk portfolio that lies before you. So I thought that might be helpful.
No, it's important you do, because we keep seeing things that's high and they never seem to move anywhere. And that my concern is, if we're not moving anywhere, what are we doing about it? That's where I'm coming from. Councillor Middleton.
Thank you, Chair. I looked at this risk register, and the two that jumped out at me was the budget. I wasn't too worried about that actually, because in the companies I've worked in the past, the old accountants like a nice provision, and they usually have a nice provision in somewhere. And Brendan's just been talking about underspends around on projects, so I can see why he's fairly comfortable with that high number. The one that did concern me more was the cyber one. And first of all, my question is, have we got insurance to cover any cyber attacks? Because it's very close to us in that Witham Forth have just had one. And luckily they took out I think it was a £6,000 insurance that has actually just saved them, I think, and don't quote me on the numbers exactly, but £120,000 ransom that they've finished up having to pay, or the insurance has. They negotiated that down, I think, from 400k. But when you look at Witham Forth, they are not a business that is having to pay salaries like Boston Borough Council or any of the other councils in the partnership. And therefore, I just wonder, what have we got that gives us some comfort if this I don't know, what is it? It's a tragedy, lands on our doorstep.
Yeah, tragic situation where we're actually exposed
We
and
can't
we're,
pay salaries, we can't,
yeah,
etc., etc.
yeah. I understand what you're saying, and I can see where you're coming from. Suzanne, you're going to
Yeah.
talk us on that one.
So I think we circulated some details about the cyber risk a few quarters ago. So I'll get that updated and circulate that again to the committee, because it's one of those areas that probably is better to do via email rather than in a meeting, so that we can share all the detail with you. Also, just to note on the risk register, I think that's why the likelihood is a 3, which isn't too high, it's a likely. But the reason why it's a high risk is the impact is a 5, because the impact of it happening much more difficult for us to mitigate. And that's why it's there on as a high risk. But I will get more details for the committee on exactly the detailed mitigation that we have in place for your assurance.
Yeah, I'd like to see, if possible, on some of these high risk ones, a bit of explanation about what we're doing with it. Like I said, let's see some movement. Let's understand on this committee, you know, we are actually delving and digging, and we're actually looking under the carpet to see what all the problems are, and sort of fishing into, you know, sorting them out, because I think that's what we need to understand. Just having highs and lows and mediums and 9s and 16s is fine, but I'd like to know underneath all that what is actually being done to get this sorted out. Exactly what Councillor Middleton's saying in his question. It's about digging, and we want to understand where things stand at the moment. And this is not clear to me where we stand on some of these issues. And I don't want to come to a meeting one day to find out we've been bitten and it's too late, because that's, to me, that's, you know, we should be dealing with it now. I'm not blaming you, and I'm not putting it on you. I'm making it very clear to everybody this meeting that this, you know, risk register needs to be a little bit more detailed with where you're attacking things and getting to the bottom of things and moving the things from high to medium or whatever. I'd like to see some movement. From my previous audit and governance committees in other companies and business I've worked in, we've had a bit of a statement about what's happening in those areas. Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Cantwell.
Yeah, just very quickly, Suzanne, are there any risks on this register that you would expect to be improving but aren't?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. There's nothing that I would raise with you as an issue that I'm concerned about. No, I can't think of anything. I was just thinking we will also be bringing an update to the Q4 report of high operational risks as well, so that gives you further assurance. But no, there's nothing that I feel isn't moving. And I do think that action rag will help to identify if there is anything that is stuck. That'll help us to see that.
Councillor Gilbert.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. I don't know if I can read it. I mean, we've gone from having really big to back to sort of a smaller type again, haven't we? I can't really see it, but I think it's BBC 03, local economy. The emphasis on the control measures is very much related to what the Boston Borough can do with partners like the Town Deal, levelling up and that sort of thing. I just wonder how much sort of more grainy information or more grainy detail we might have about the overall situation from the private sector's perspective in terms of vacant properties, declining value of commercial property, maybe businesses that are not paying their business rates or are in crisis and that sort of thing. Because for me, that's a much bigger indicator of the likely future success of the town than you know what we're doing, the good stuff that we're doing. It may have an impact, but those other indications are, I think, as significant, if not slightly more significant. And I just wonder whether we can capture some of that detail. Thank you.
Yes, I will pick that up with the lead officer and make sure there's more detail in that for Q4.
When you get to arrive at these numbers and all these risk levels, is it in conjunction with the various operating ADs, or who decides all these numbers, and who decides at what levels we're going to place things? Who's responsible for that?
So there is quite a discussion about it, and in some cases the discussion is even better than the number itself, because it brings out the different aspects of it. The number is just there to show us the priority and to get it in the right order. So we don't worry too much about the scientific background behind the number, but there is some guidance which you'll find at the back of the papers that shows how we reach those numbers, and it is the lead officer, often with a team, who will pull together where they think that lies, and then SLT have the final view, the leadership team, to assess whether they feel that is the right level or not. But there's quite a discussion about it, and I think that gives us, that's the best part of the process for me, is that discussion about where we are.
Yeah, because I think in this day and age, as life goes on and on, we're getting to a bigger risk in everything we're doing in life. And I think, I'd like to see something a bit more stronger that says that we've really got this under control. You know what I mean? Right, Gideon.
Thank you. Yeah. I realise it's covered under BBC 05, the budget. But is it worth splitting out the risks involved with the internal drainage board, given that they're so high?
Yes, we are splitting out the budget risks in any case from the risks that were in the budget papers. So I think IDB is in there. If not, yes, we will include that. But I think from memory, and probably finance colleagues can remind me, I think that's already in there, but that's a good shout. Thank you.
Adam, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Suzanne. Yeah, I just really wanted to go back to echo something that you had said, Chair, about going through the risk register either line by line or by exception. I'd certainly welcome that. There are areas of this that I would like to question. Don't think it's urgent, but yeah, in my previous career, I seem to spend a lot of my time going through these things. So, as you say, I think it's a really useful process to go through, but there are things I think that might need a refresh in here, and it'd be good just to understand where we are with those. One of the things I was quickly going to ask, page 124, item 3.2, there's a reference to the head of HR attending a March meeting. Is that this meeting? And are you coming on to that now? Excellent, thank you.
Okay,
thank you.
Councillor Gilbert.
Well, actually, my question does relate to BBC 08, which is about staffing. Have we got someone from HR that we can perhaps address this question to specifically, or shall I ask it here?
Yes, if you want to, and if it isn't covered, then we can always come back to it afterwards. But yes, if we
it's just that I'm always very concerned about that sort of staff welfare, and having worked in the public sector myself, I know that all senior management teams are committed to trying to make the working environment as conducive to efficiency as possible. But I do sometimes think that what we attempt to do is a little bit in the counterproductive sense, undermining of individual members of staff. And I just wonder whether or not whether we can have any figures about the extent of absenteeism in the council, maybe the length of time that certain people have been off, to get some idea about what the issues might actually be for them. Because, as I say, an emphasis on efficiency can be both a positive thing, but it can actually make people quite stressed in the workplace and actually counterproductively adds to their work burden. And I've seen that elsewhere in the public sector, and I just wonder whether there's any possibility of finding a way, I don't have the answer to this, but find a way of capturing some of that, if it's at all possible. That makes sense.
Yeah, that might be a good time for us to bring in our colleagues, unless there are any other questions on the specific risks, so that we can talk about staff wellbeing.
Okay, we'll focus on staff wellbeing now then. So we'll ask our colleagues to be available to answer any questions. Sorry, can I just take your name? Pleased to meet you, Aileen. Thank you.
Thanks. So if I can kick off, Mr. Chairman, we've also got Rachel Robinson, who's our Group Manager for Organisational Development across the three councils. So with your agenda pack this evening, Rachel has pulled together a document which looks to kind of articulate the baseline across the council at the moment in terms of health and wellbeing in the workforce, but also identify some of the things that we're doing organisationally to try and make this a really good place to work and make staff feel supported, well looked after, as they go about their role. I was going to make the suggestion that Rachel just walks us through this paper quickly, and then we go into a wider conversation to try and give you the assurance that you would like on issues like Councillor Gilbert's just raised around us having an eye on things like health in the workforce. We do have a quarterly report that actually landed today, and we're going to start to work through that data, which draws out exactly the issues that you're describing around knowing sickness levels, reasons for sickness absence, and what we can then do as interventions to try and address them. So with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Rachel, if that's okay, just to walk us through this paper initially.
Good place to start. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, there's a report in your pack on pages 137 and 138. So on 137 is a summary of baseline information, and then on page 138 we have a summary of existing interventions. So I am conscious that that report was based on Q2 data. We do have, as James has just said, some hot off the press sort of Q4 data as part of that. So if I can draw your attention down to about halfway down page 137, where it says Boston Borough Council staff poll data. So we pose 4 questions regularly to the workforce, and we use that as a bit of a litmus test in terms of employee wellbeing. So the table at the bottom of 137, so that provides the data, as you can see in the columns. There's the information for Q4 23-24, and then also Q2 24-25. So as I just said, I've got the latest for Q4. So if you're happy, I'll just share those updates with you so you have that picture over a period of time. So that first question, which is around, do you feel informed? So this is what we pose to staff about decisions that are being made. In the table, that's the bottom line. And you'll see that from Q4, we saw 50%. So when I say 50%, there's 3 options of how you can answer this question of whether you feel informed. You can answer yes, sometimes, or no. And the 50% and the 56% are the people that answered yes. So we can see that there was a rise of 6% between Q4 and Q2. When we look at Q4 for this year, that raised further to 67.7%. So when we compare that in terms of this time last year, that's nearly an 18% increase positively. As I said, that was if you just answer yes question. If we combine people that answered yes and sometimes, that increases that Q4 for now to 96.1%. The question 2, which is around, do you feel that we recognise and support positive mental health in the workplace? So again, Q4 in 23-24 was 69%. That rose ever so slightly in Q2 to 70%, but then that's risen further to 82% in Q4 for 24-25. So again, over that period of a year, that's risen by 13%. Question 3 is around asking employees if they feel valued at work. Q4 23-24 was 69%. That rose to 76% in Q2, and that's risen to a further 84.3% in Q4 of 24-25. So over that period, again, is a 15% increase. And then the final question is around asking if they feel that there's opportunities to learn and develop their skills and expertise as part of working for the council. So Q4 and Q2 remain the same at 76%, apologies, but that rose to 82% as at Q4 in 24-25. So there was an increase of 6% over that time period. So across the board, we've seen when we look at those 4 questions that we've had a positive increase over that period. And if I draw your attention to page 138, that provides a kind of summary of interventions that have either been implemented over the last year or strengthened over the last year in terms of what we're doing. And as you can see, that's a suite of support that's covered, and that's around recognising that it's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to employee support. So you'll see that the interventions cover both mental and physical health support, as well as employee benefits, incident supports, manager support and guidance, and also as training, as well as regular data for oversight of absence. All of which really, I believe, is a demonstration of how the commitment of the council and the wider partnership look to create a supportive and healthy work environment for its employees. If you're happy to, I'd like to invite Aileen in now as the head of HR, just to provide some additional information around HR best practice and how her team supports managers.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, everyone. a lot of the interventions we work with Rachel and the wider team in terms of implementing, and as Rachel's reflected, we will do some early intervention. So a lot of what we've also been working on is some kind of proactive work around any absences. So part of my team will look at any absences and will flag particularly any mental health related absences, regardless of whether it's work related or personal, and we'll flag them on a daily basis and send a host of kind of support materials to the relevant line manager, as well as how they might reach out to the individual in terms of support that they can be working through. When you look at kind of broader things you can do or to consider in terms of, I guess, managing that balance of how you can be both supportive and ensure that you're considering well-being and the kind of benefit of individuals, as well as managing it and kind of balancing the two of those so that you're effectively managing it as well. There is a lot of kind of interventions and measures the councils have in place. So return to work processes are part of the culture, and in fact the quarterly reporting that the ADs get will flag if there's particular return to works that haven't happened across their service. There's also going to be a bit of work in terms of developing a better reporting tool for managers that will enable them to kind of have a bit more focus on what support. That helps both integrate people back to work, but also identify if there's any trends or issues so they can have a real discussion about whether they're getting to the bottom of what support that individual needs. You've got clear policies, you have a good pay measures in place, but also other kind of time off provisions. So you do allow people to consider the other kind of reasons they might need to take emergency time off work for family reasons, for caring reasons, for dependents care, and you do have provisions and policies in place for those. You also have a kind of an agile hybrid working as well as a flex working, and that will allow people to kind of manage some of their challenges as well as ensure that they're doing that appropriately with kind of demands of the work. The reporting, as we've talked about, there's quite a few different types of reports. So the ADs will get a quarterly report dashboard of their service, so they can compare not just by council, but they can look across the partnership. So if you expect absences to be greater in one particular area because of the workforce and the manual nature of it, they've got a comparison across the partnership so they can really understand that rather than just looking at one particular council. We also do quarterly workforce reporting that's shared with the unions. So the unions, joint unions, will go through that with the senior management on a quarterly basis, and it's also reviewed internally by the senior leadership team and the Workforce Development Board. And then there's also a quarterly case management report that goes into corporate management group that goes beyond just sickness absence, but clearly a lot of the casework is related to kind of mental health specialist interventions, but also sickness absence, return to work, and some of that as well. So they track that along with other ER casework that my team support with. So yeah, I think in the context of some of the work, when you trend it against kind of growing, press pieces you see about mental health absences increasing and continue to increase, you see things about long-term sickness incidences are definitely increased across the UK. You do have absences, but when you look at your absence trends at Boston, they're not going up. They're remaining what they are. Clearly, yes, could they come lower? That would be helpful, but given there are growing kind of demands on services like the NHS and other bits, there is a good control of the absences and support in place.
Very comprehensive from both of you. Thank you very much. My question is all this information recorded on each employee that you're monitoring and working with and supporting? And do we evaluate the cost of all this at all, by department or by month or whatever? Is there a record kept of how much it's costing us to do all this?
So can I respond to that, Chair?
Of course you can.
So absences are recorded by managers in the HR system. So the data export is live that captures all of the absence, and we'll also capture other types of absences, whether it be appointments or other types of time off provision. So all of the kind of working away from absences there. We will report the total absences. We'll look at the top reasons for absence, but we'll focus on working days lost, because that gives you a good way to compare trends, but also how you compare to kind of other employers, whether across the partnership or broader. So yeah, there's an awful lot of data that is used and compared and trying to find benchmark data, but typically you find it tends to be 13 months old. So it's difficult for us to get a live picture for you, but we do some work with the local HR, local government network. So we get some data from them that we feed in as well and check on. In terms of cost, one of the bits of the report that we do into the senior leadership team, the quarterly workforce, is the actual cost of the absence. So do we measure all of these interventions added up? If that's your question, probably not, but we measure the actual cost of the absence as related to the kind of the absence cost of the individual.
Yeah, I'm just curious about, you know, the actual manpower that's managing all this processes of dealing with all these issues and the cost of it all. I was just curious to know that. So the other thing is I want to know is what measures are in place then to reduce all these percentages and get them down and down and down? I mean, what are you doing to get this under control, if that's the term to use, or to reduce the percentages that's getting a little bit slightly higher with the looks of it here? So what we're doing?
So we'll, as I say, we have on the quarterly, we'll make some action plans in terms of recommendations on what we can address and tackle. I think the difficulty you have is some of it will be related to climate. So some of it will be whether there's been an increase in demands locally on mental health services. So there'll be a limit on what we can do around that. But that's why we constantly look with the senior leadership team on different interventions. So the introduction of local kind of therapy solution was there to try and tackle internally a solution to where there isn't the NHS services as accessible. What becomes difficult is if we had not done all those things, the absence levels would definitely be greater. So you are probably seeing a controlled number by those interventions. And what we won't be able to do is just say that's enough. We'll have to keep looking and continuously look at what could be done. As an example, on the latest data, mental health continues to be a high reason for absence. We see some bits around post-operative at the moment. Again, we would need to probably look into that. That could just be a one-off. It could be this quarter that happens to be people that have accessed kind of operations. It's not going to be something that you continually have a problem with, but we will need to obviously monitor to see if that's a problem and what you could do about it. There are lots of steps and things that are a continual management. I don't think it always has to be a new thing, but we'll need to continually look at whether the policy's fit for purpose, whether there is continued focus from the services, from managers, whether they are continually equipped to manage these absences.
And just on exit interviews, you obviously do exit interviews, I take it, do you?
We offer exit interviews. They are optional. So they're done in two ways. Every leaver is sent a questionnaire that's either an MS Forms, or if they're a manual workforce, they're sent a questionnaire. But they're then invited to attend an interview, and someone in my HR team will contact them to try and arrange a meeting with them pre-exit. We probably would, I would say, have around 40% take up in terms of exit interviews of leavers.
And do you find out the information on all these things you just discussed, whether it's all been people are happy with what you're doing, or?
Yeah, no, it depends on why they're leaving.
Yeah.
Obviously, if they're leaving for career reasons, then their information will be more related to whether they felt some of the other stuff was in place. But yeah, we would assess the main reasons for leaving. So even if through the exit data we're not getting the detailed information, we do, we try to encourage, we have lots of categories for reasons for leaving in the HR system so that we can look at the kind of reasons. So even with a resignation, we try and break it down. So if a manager knows someone's leaving because pay's better, they're leaving because they get better flexible working, or they're relocating, we try and capture that so we can understand if there's any kind of work that's needed around the policies the council have.
That's good, thank you. Councillor Gilbert.
Yeah, I've got a few points actually. Point number one, I presume the questionnaires go out quarterly, do they? So if you send these questions, I think it says 4 questions are regularly posed. I mean, how regularly is regularly?
For twice a year now.
Twice a year. Okay, that's fair enough. And do the people who are off sick, are they sent the same questions to answer, or are they sort of excluded from that sample?
Yeah, managers are asked to provide the questions to the people that are off sick. I can't guarantee they are received by the people off sick, but we expect our services to be doing that for people who are
do we find out whether or not the people who are off sick actually make a return of the questionnaires, or?
Well, the returns are anonymous.
Right. Okay. So would we be able to find out if people had sent them back?
No.
Presumably not. Okay. All right. That's fair enough then. The other point is, sometimes with these questions, you know, is a tendency to sort of ask questions that you feel that you've got some control over answering. So, you know, organisations will sort of say, do you feel you're getting enough training? And then if they say no, you can then put some more training in place. But what seems to me to be the thing that drives most people off work is stress, and stress related to the actual job itself. And sometimes the context of the organisation increases the levels of stress that people are experiencing. And I'm thinking in particular about burdensome KPIs and KPTs. I know these things are like, they're in the DNA of public services these days. But I do sometimes wonder whether or not, you know, we need to start a conversation about just how helpful things like KPTs, KPIs, performance targets actually are. And one place maybe to start that conversation will be to ask the question, do you actually feel your job is stressful? And then tease out from that why that actually might be the case. Because I think the drive over the last 20, 30 years has been to make public service organisations a little bit more like private sector organisations with measurable inputs and outcomes. But I don't think it always works in the public sector. So
can I just jump in there? I wouldn't say that, quite frankly, because I think you're inviting people to say they got stress, and I don't agree with what you just said there.
Well,
but,
I'm just saying.
I mean, no, I hear what you say. I think you've got to be very careful with questionnaires when you're doing these things to make sure you're not pointing the answers to people and giving them the answers and giving them the opportunity to say, "Oh, I'm stressed out." I think, you know, I just think very, very careful. Anyway, James, go on, tell us what you do.
Yeah, thank you. It was more just in relation to stress within the workforce, where there are issues around mental health, for example, in the workforce. The workforce are telling us that's primarily driven by outside of work issues. So those bigger challenges that people have in their lives. I guess this evening through this paper, we just wanted to give you the assurance that we've got a plan around what was a perceived risk, I think, to the organisation, and we are actively addressing it. So, for example, we have a workforce board in place. And part of the role of that board is to oversee kind of this programme of work. So that's one of the controls that we have in place to give us kind of that oversight and this regular tracking of the issues and the mechanisms that Aileen has described, which enable us to manage any potential risks that might fall out alongside the intervention. So, but that's kind of where we are at present in terms of we do have information that tells us, though, stress, for example, on the whole for the workforce is caused by out of work issues.
If I just come back, Mr. Chairman, I mean, thank you for your very helpful intervention there, and that was really constructive, very timely and constructive. Thank you. No, I mean, I just wanted. I mean, I've written down here strain within teams, and I think, you know, there is a cumulative effect when someone goes off sick that tends to increase the amount of stress within the team, and I just wonder whether or not there's some way of capturing that.
Let me take you away and give it some thought. I mean, the reality is we rely on our service managers to run our services day to day, and it's really for them to look at that issue and make sure they're balancing the workload as appropriate in periods of sickness absence. There's short term, there's long term absence, and we have to make plans as people that run services to try and mitigate the impact of that absence on the wider team. But I appreciate at times it can be difficult to do that.
I'm not being awkward. I just think that, you know, maybe sometimes we need to just take a slightly sort of different sort of glance at these things from a slightly different perspective. That's all.
Okay, I take your point, and I appreciate what you're saying. Gideon.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one for Rachel. Do we know how many people actually responded to the questionnaires and what response rate that is? How many were sent out?
Well, yeah, sorry. I'll have to come back with the exact numbers because I can't recall them off the top of my head, but I know when we did them, they were statistically enough in terms of that. The number that I've got off the top of my head is for across the partnership, but I can come back with specifically for Boston.
And following on from that, then how do the responses compare with those from across the partnership? I don't mean the number of responses. I mean the answers given. Does Boston compete well, as it were, with the others?
Yeah, when we receive the data, we do the high level one, which is a partnership figure, and then we break it down by each of the 3 councils. They're there or thereabouts, I would say. Sometimes there's a couple of fluctuations, but they are about there, about on par. So, but it's helpful because it means we can then direct any kind of work that we do if there's specific pockets over particular areas.
Thank you. Councillor Cantwell.
Thank you, Chair. I think I would welcome continued updates on health and wellbeing. Really, it's quite interesting the statistics we've got. I just wondered, at the back it mentions a number of interventions that we've introduced, 15 in total, and you've mentioned we've bolstered them as well. I suppose my concern is, are we at the end of how much mitigating we can do for certain issues, or are you confident we can continue to put in more interventions and strengthen the ones we've got?
I guess as and when new opportunities arise to put interventions in place, we'll always actively consider them, depending on what the needs of the organisation is at that point in time. So there's a few examples there of schemes we've been notified of, we've thought they bring benefit, so we've embraced them and rolled them out across the workforce. So we're very open to bringing new ideas and opportunities forward all the time. What I would say is, in terms of looking at this going forward, kind of the detail of this, I would suggest probably sits more in the C&C space from a scrutiny perspective, as opposed to an A&G space potentially. I think our role this evening is to try and give you assurance in terms of the controls that we've got around this, but I think it's probably a scrutiny function to go through the detail of the work programme, would be my observation.
No, I tend to agree with you on that as well. So, yeah, but it's nice to have the overview and it's nice to understand what's going on. Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you very much indeed for those reports. Are really, really helpful, and certainly welcome again seeing further updates on this. I just had a small question on exit interviews, and I just wondered whether we're seeing any sort of uncertainty or sort of fallout really from the issues around local government reorganisation, whether anybody is citing that as a reason for leaving or one of the reasons they're leaving.
We're not seeing it directly as yet. I'll be honest, it might be an area down the line we want to kind of add in as a kind of a particular thing, but equally, I guess what we do is compare when people are going to other employers, whether, if we can get the information, whether they're going to other local government employers or whether they're going to different industries. So again, typically we see most people, depending on the nature of the role, going into other local governments. So I wouldn't see the kind of whole concept of LGR being the driver of them leaving if they're moving to another local government employer. But it's something we would need to monitor. We haven't seen it, but there's also been a lot of engagement with staff. So at the moment, I think they're sitting to sort of see what happens next.
Thank you. One more, and that's it. Over to you.
Oh, thank you. That's nice of you. Thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. I mean, I will have a simple question. I know that employees are the backbone of any business. Once you have a happy team, you will have a happy business, and that's how it works. Because I was going to put some few questions, but they're already asked. And we have here that I think our staffing is at high risk. So this is part of it as well. What I want to ask you is, how can you rate your success by implementing all what you have stated, and how does it work with our staff? I may say, have we been successful in implementing all of these ways, surveys and things, and talking to employees, that now we are more stable?
Yeah, so I guess we would track the impact of our interventions through the quarterly workforce report that comes forward. So that comes forward and it tells us what progress we're making in areas and where we need to do some more work. So we'll receive the Q4 report this afternoon. I think it came through. We'll now be going through that over the next few days and saying, look, what more can we be doing? These are the areas that really need the focus, and that's what we'll be looking to take through the workforce board over the next month or so. So we have got a mechanism to regularly track the progress we're making from the interventions that we've deployed.
Come back, there is just one thing which is, I just learned about it probably a couple of weeks ago. They call it face return. So basically, when people have these mental issues, they can do face return based on 2 days, half day, 3 days, and it goes. Has it been implemented in our sector?
So we've done face returns for a long time. It's not just for people with mental health issues. It could be somebody's got a physical injury they've had, for example, and they need to rebuild their strength or something similar. So it's used in lots of circumstances regularly throughout the partnership, and it has been for many, many years.
Right, that's it. James, I'm sorry, I forgot your name again now. Just Rachel, Aileen, thank you for coming this evening. Thank you very much, Suzanne, as well. Been very enlightening as well, and it's just nice to have that information about the health and well-being of the employees. But I agree with James, it should be on C&C for more detail and more questioning than here. But anyway, thank you for coming. We do appreciate it. Safe journey home. Thank you. Oh, right. We just need to make sure then, do we have the committee considers and notes the quality risk monitoring information for Q3? Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Scoot, seconder. Councillor Marston. We move to the vote. All in favour? Yes. Thank you very much. Carried. Right. Item 5, the internal audit progress report. I'm going to ask Matthew to present that to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, everybody. I think just first of all, just to share with you that this will be my last audit committee with you. So I'm moving on to a new role, which is why my colleague to the right of me, Mark, is here. So Mark is also a team manager from the Internal Audit Service, and Mark and I are working on a phased handover. And going forwards, Mark will be coming to these committees and being your point of contact and your audit team manager. So then if I could take members to the progress report, I think starting on page 145. So obviously the purpose of this report is to update the committee on all the work we've done since we last reported to you. Just a quick look at the performance dashboard. I mean, when I did this, it was a couple of weeks ago to pull this together. I think we're about 99% finished on 24-25. There's one more closure meeting to go, which is booked in for this week. And then all of your 24-25 audit work is completed. And the team are already working on your 25-26 Q1 audits. So that's a good position to be in. And if I could take members to page 148. So that is just the high level view of the work we've done since we last reported to you. So you can see the top one there. As you know, if we do a limited assurance audit, we do a follow-up. And you can see that payroll reconciliations follow-up was completed in January. So that's moved from a limited assurance opinion to substantial. So that's a very good piece of work. Then you've got budget monitoring and the waste depots, which are adequate. And I know members have been talking about cybersecurity. So we have just completed an audit, which is around the training of people. So people can be the weakness in your cybersecurity. And that's received an adequate level of assurance as well, with one high-level finding. So the following pages just give members a summary of that work that we've done, and just sets out in a bit more detail those audits that I've just gone through. And then if I could take members, should have a supplement paper, which hopefully they've all got a copy of. So this is, as you know, we track findings to see if they've been input by the completion date agreed with your officers and managers. So on this additional paper, you'll see that there are 5 actions, and I think 4 of them are where officers are requesting a further extension to the date to implement these. So these are previously agreed actions from audits that we've done, and officers are requesting for an extension to implement these. If you just come down to the 3rd one, which is the budget monitoring revenue 24-25. After I sent this out, we did receive some additional information. So actually that one we can evidence and that one will be closed. So for this paper, it is just the 4 other actions. And it's just useful for members to have a view on those requests for extending the timeline to implement those. And I'll pause there, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions so far for Matthew, anybody? Yes, Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, and thanks for all you've done on the previous meetings. So it's a shame you're moving on. Just a quick one really on page 151. This is well, 2 points really. On the budget overspends, are we talking about particularly high or low incidents, and what is the management sort of response? What's being done?
Yeah, thank you. I think I can answer on the audits, and then officers might want to come in on the finance side. So I think you'll see it's sort of 2 paragraphs up from the bottom on page 151. This was previously identified where the section 151 officer wanted these escalated, so she was aware of these variances in the budget. And when we did this, it was found that hadn't quite been put in place at that time. So we're just repeating that recommendation in here. In terms of how often that is, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but no, I don't think finance can either.
So this.
Put your microphone on, please. Thank you.
Yeah. So just to clarify, the £20,000 escalation, that was the audit recommendation that Matthew just referred to that's now been closed off. So we have identified within the budget monitoring action plans where there are variances greater than £20,000. So the purpose of this was to provide earlier oversight of those variances. So these variances are still reported as part of the quarterly monitoring process, but it was to provide earlier oversight of it. So as previously discussed, though, managers are aware of they are the owners of their budget, so they should also be having those internal conversations as well. But this was another fail-safe, if you like, really, or sort of another safety measure introduced to when those provide those early warning signals of when things are looking a little bit awry.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. And the other thing I just wanted to ask on the same page, it's simply about the budget monitoring proficiency training. Do we know if a program is now underway, if a provider's been identified?
I'd need to go back to refer because I know when this questionnaire was provided to managers, it did coincide with a series of training sessions that the service was undertaking regarding setting of the budget. So I don't know of the timeline of that one, but it is something that is on our action plan as a service to almost do a baseline of where budget manager skills and expertise are. And I think, as has sort of been mentioned earlier in the meeting, if you ask people, do they need more training, they'll always say yes, but we need to establish and quantify what level that training is required and where that skills gap actually is.
Okay, anything else, Adam? Councillor Middleton.
Thank you, Chairman. I notice again on 151, page 151, it talks about over half the people didn't understand how to set a budget. I think that's what it says. Is that before your training then, or is it after? And has that number dramatically changed since the training?
I'd need to go back and clarify the timeline of the questionnaire and the training, and then what we probably need to do is go back and do a follow-up to actually say, or maybe give more measured questions, if you like, really, to, do you know what your budget is? So it's just trying to probably search into that question, or sort of be a bit more reaching into that question to actually understand where is their skills or knowledge gap, because in the day-to-day sense, everybody budgets. So it's whether it's that terminology issue, if you like. I don't know if Brendan wants to come in.
Yeah, can you just say, give me the context around that? Is that on page?
It's on sheet and it says there are.
Can you put your microphone on, Councillor Middleton? I think your microphone's gone off. Thank you.
Okay. That's so whenever we do an audit, there are 4 levels of assurance that we give. And those range from substantial down to adequate, and then limited and no assurance. And in our reports, we do give a definition of what those are. But essentially, no assurance is where we've looked at an area and found that controls wouldn't be operating or risk management isn't operating. And then limited assurance means we can give it some assurance. But so basically, there's 4 different levels of how we provide our assurance opinion when we do your audit reviews. Thank you.
Councillor Cantwell.
Thank you, Chair. I just kind of wanted to pick up on the response rate of this survey, really. A 39% return rate with 37 responses. I think that's quite poor, really, out of the 95 budget holders we've got. So I don't think we actually do have the whole picture of what our budget holders feel, because most of them didn't fill out the survey. So I think we need to go back to them, or we need to have a follow-up survey, or we need to do something to make sure we get 100% survey or damn near close. Because budgets are a very important part of what this council does. And I don't think we have the full picture of how confident our budget holders feel.
Matthew.
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's a good question. I think this has generated some further conversation, and I think there'll be some further work between audit and finance colleagues about getting better response rates or how we go about questionnaires in the future to improve that.
I personally, reading the page 151 halfway down to the bottom, are worried about the whole lot of that on there, because it almost implies to me that people are not clear, or not sure, haven't been trained, don't know what they're doing, and it worries me, quite frankly. I just think that this needs some urgent action, quite frankly. That's my personal view. Brendan.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I agree with you to some degree in that none of this makes for pleasant reading, but I do wonder whether the results that we have before us are referring to a disengagement that is rather hard to measure, but is probably associated with not being at the centre of how budgets are formed and not being involved in the process. There is no local government officer, I would suggest to the committee, who doesn't know what a budget is. It's in local government officers' DNA, because they're always, dealing with each other in terms of trying to get a share of the budget. So I think in terms of the plans that we're forming for the 26-27 budget process, we would look to see an enhanced communications endeavour around the whole process of budget formation, trying to make the organisations in the partnership and here in Boston much more aware and conscious of the context, what we're trying to achieve, and also to make sure that there's an awareness of the processes that are necessarily part of it, in terms of giving them an opportunity to put forward requests for budget. Not that those will necessarily be accepted, but showing how the process is designed to make the planned budget affordable and to bridge any forecast shortfall in budget that may be encountered in the next budget year. So not to diminish any of the comments that members have made, but I do think there are grounds for optimism here. And I think when people have perhaps indicated that they don't understand how to, the term was how to acquire or build or whatever the budget that is closest to them, that's an engagement and comms issue. It's a hearts and minds issue. actually, I suspect they all do know what a budget is. So it mitigates a bit the concern that members have understandably expressed, I would suggest.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. My concern is, I mean, talking to various people, when I was doing the BTAC review, some people are budget holders but don't know how the budget's arrived at, and quite frankly, given a budget, not got no involvement in putting a budget together. And to me, people should not be just given budgets and say, there's your budget, get on with it. They should be part of that instrument of putting a budget together and understanding how it has arrived at. When I question other people about budgets, some people hadn't got a clue. You know, to me, that's wrong. People who are responsible for budgets should have an input into a budget, not just given a budget and said, work to that number. That is not the way to run a business or give people a budget, in my personal view. I'll take your comment back.
I entirely agree with the point you're making. What I was trying to indicate was that there is already a process that is being framed to deal with just the issue that you described, Chair. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I was just going backwards to when I was doing my little reviews. I found out what people did or didn't know about budgets. But thank you very much, Brendan. Right. Sorry, let's go on to Councillor Campbell. We're finished. Beg your pardon, Gideon.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's already been covered. To be honest, it was. I think since I put my hand up, then it's already been covered. So no need to.
Okay. Any more questions for Matthew around the table? Matthew, can I say thank you very much for the 2 years that I've worked with you and this committee has worked with you. We've had a very great working relationship. I've enjoyed the experience and your knowledge and your know-how and the conversations we've had. I'm going to miss you, and I'm sure this committee is going to miss you, because you are a very professional person, and you know, all I can say is that you will be sadly missed. But good luck in your new role, and all the very best in your endeavours, and you know, may your career flourish. And Mark, got a job to live up to. Thank you. Right, let's move on then from that one. So let me just have a look at the. Lost my bit of paper now.
You're here. Agenda number 6.
Sorry, where are we? That's not yours. Let me just go. I've got that many bits of paper in my hand, and I'm coming and going. Right, so there we are. The committee asked to note and comment on this report, which you have done. Everybody happy to take it as a noted? Yes? Thank you very much. Let's move on to item 6, which is Combined Assurance Status Report. I'm going to ask John to present this to us.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully members can hear me. So this is the Combined Assurance Status Report. You'll have seen this report comes around once a year. This is the latest version of the report, and its purpose is really twofold. The first is it produces a full record of assurance of the council's key critical services, key risks, partnership and projects, and that's used to help us prioritise any areas for future work. And secondly, it supports Matt and the internal audit team to identify areas for their consideration as part of next year's internal audit plan, which is your next item on this evening's agenda. The main report starts on page 165 of your packs, and I'm going to go straight to page 167, which describes the process, or part describes the process we go through to identify the levels of assurance. So you can see there are 3 levels of assurance that are measured. One is a red status, one's a yellow status, and amber, and the other green. So hopefully quite straightforward to follow as we go through, green being the strongest level and red the lowest level of assurance. In terms of how we arrive at the assurance level, the internal audit team goes around and meets with senior managers and service managers across the organisation, looking for that level of assurance, both from the management, but also from any internal departments that we might have who provide reports during the year that aid to provide that evidence that we've got the arrangements in place, and also any independent work that's been done either by the internal audit or any external inspections. So that's the 3 lines of defence model as described there. On the same page, you can see the overall assurance levels for the council, and you can see they're broadly similar to what they were this time last year. Just one point to make: the assurance levels are a point in time. So this report was produced towards the back end of Q3, start of Q4. So some of the assurance levels will vary during the year, and this is a snap shot in time. Moving on to page 169 to 172, you've got the strategic risks. I'm not going to go through them. I think they're the same risks that you've already looked at earlier on this evening, but they are captured in this report. Page 173, this starts the sections where we look at each directorate. So this is a breakdown by Deputy Chief Executive level. So you have on page 173 the Deputy Chief Executive for Communities, a list of all of the key services that they operate, the overall assurance level for that directorate, a brief description of the critical activities broken down by the red and amber categories, and then some commentary from the Deputy Chief Executive, which runs on to page 174. On page 175, you then have the same layout for the Deputy Chief Executive for Corporate Development. Pages 177 to 178 looks at economic development, and then page 179 to 180 looks at strategic partnership working. And the report follows that through. You've got key projects listed on pages 181 to 182, key partnerships on 183, and finally emerging risks on pages 184 to 185. So I think I'll pause there, Chairman, and see if there's any questions. So just to say, we have got some colleagues from assistant directors here tonight from the various service areas who might be able to assist with any questions that members have got. Thank you.
I'll put my microphone on. So I was saying I'm very keen about inward investment and encouraging new investment to the area. What sort of plans or what sort of policy or what sort of actions are we taking to develop companies to come into Boston, and how are we going about it to encourage people to either relocate here or expand into the area and so on? I'd be welcome somebody to give me a...
You've probably got 3 people here that can't answer the question, I'm afraid. I think you've got Victoria, John and I, and economic development's not our area, so we can take it away and come back to you with an answer, but I probably won't give you a very good one this evening.
Thank you. I'll put it on the action list, James. Thank you very much. But I am very keen because I think it's always important to understand, what we are doing, and I'm always very keen to see new businesses come into the area, relocating here, setting up new operations and so on. And this has got to be a program for me to see that people are actually getting out there and developing it. That's where I'm coming from. Okay, any other questions for anybody else on this report from John? Councillor Gilbert.
I've got a couple of questions. The first one relates to strategic partnership working, and I guess in particular in respect of developing talent, growing the local economy. I just wonder whether or not any thought has been given to the government's proposals to restructure local government, as in terms of an impact on Boston as a town centre economy. Because when we had the 74 restructuring, it, I think, did have an effect on the quality and the number of high value, well-paid jobs that there were in towns like Boston. And I think I can see the same thing happening again here, where restructuring takes place. Nobody actually factors in the effect of having fewer good quality jobs decent salaries and the local authority is a good employer and does, move people from its own employment into the private sector, and that process can be returned. So that's one issue. I just wondered whether that's been thought about. The second issue is in relation to health and partnership working with health authorities and the NHS. We've had a lot of change in Boston over the last 15 years, really, in terms of the number of people coming here. And what I've noticed is there's a significantly higher number of smokers now and a significantly higher number of drinkers. And I just wonder whether or not any of that information, that detail, is being captured by any of our partners and is featuring in the sort of strategic ambition to improve the health of the town. I don't know whether you're answering that question or it's just a point to the chair, really. I guess I'm asking you, Mr.
I'm going to ask if anybody wants to give you an answer. If you can't, we're going to take it away, bring it back. Anybody? James?
I could probably help a little bit on the LGR question, the impact of local government reorganisation. So when submissions go into government, there'll be an expectation they articulate the economic benefits to an area of the submissions of the proposals that are brought forward. So one of the considerations around local government reorganisation will be economic impact. I can't tell you much more than that at this point in time, but I know that's one of the things they will obviously look closely at. In terms of smoking, etc., we do have a health and wellbeing board that's chaired, I believe, by Emily Spicer, who's our assistant director in that area. They work closely with the NHS and lots of other partners. So that is the board that would pick up those kind of issues and feed them into our strategies. So I can't give you any more detail than that. I can get Emily to come back with some more data, but I can assure you that it is feeding into our system from the NHS.
Right, John wants to pop in with a question or a comment.
Yeah, it was just in terms of that data, the NHS and local authorities, I think they still do this, certainly used to produce something called a joint strategic needs assessment that would look at a lot of that type of data that you're talking about to inform future plans and strategies for health and wellbeing. So that type of data certainly, if it's still in that same format or if it's been changed, certainly exists.
Whether or not that data could be brought to a meeting like this, or
it's probably not appropriate for this meeting, but I'm sure we could circulate the link to the information, ask our colleague from that area to find the information and send it to members. Yeah.
Thank you, John. Councillor Cantwell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. On page 178, at the bottom, it mentions Boston Borough Council securing £45,000 to secure for a decarbonisation study for the industrial site, and it just got me thinking. In regards to our risks for our assets, do we classify our street lighting as an asset where we have to have a decarbonisation plan? Because transitioning to more renewable lights would help that quite a lot. So I'm just wondering if that's part of our plans.
Anybody can give us an answer on that one, please?
I don't know, I'm afraid.
That's a question we're going to have to take away and get an answer and bring it back to the meeting. Is that all right? Thank you.
That's me left. Thank you. Looking, at the scores for the health, as Councillor Gilbert touched on, local economy, we have medium, but I think, in my opinion, probably they're more higher than, that what it should be as a medium, and especially we talk about it, in different subjects tonight. The reality of the town, it doesn't reflect the medium risk. It reflects something else. The reality of the health in town, it reflects something else when you're outside, but when we sit here, it reflects something else. So I do not know what sort of ways do you use to get to that statement of having it medium. That's one thing. And I think as a council, we get a lot of grants for communities and leisure. I think we should use some of our money to develop a strategy to how to integrate people coming from Europe, coming and living in Boston if they have jobs, because they have to understand these things. And unfortunately, probably they are not having a knowledge about what's going on and what we do. So whatever we're going to achieve, they will always pull you back. If you have another 100 people, 150 coming that year, they may have other issues. So, like, I mean, for me, what strategy should we take, to integrate people and make people aware of what's happening and what's going on, so we can take the town all together to the right place? So.
Yeah, I think I can answer I think the second part is around the council setting its strategies, and that's not really for me to talk about. In terms of the first part, how we pull this information together. So this is very much based around how your managers deliver their services. I think what you're also talking about there is wider risks that the council will probably capture through their strategic risk registers and through their policies and strategies. But what we do for this is we talk to the assistant directors. We look at your risk registers, we look at your performance information. So we have a load of things that we bring together to give us an overall assurance at the moment in time that we do this. So this is very much reflective of services that people deliver. I think you're also talking about just wider impacts for Boston, which is probably wider than this report. And that's more about kind of the strategies that the council sets.
With something is regarding the homelessness, if I may come to that one. We know that the numbers of homeless people has increased in Boston, and I'm fully aware that the contract, we have it with the subcontractor who does for us the surveys and go around the town and basically found the homeless, and then we deal with them. Is gonna finish probably, is finishing probably this year. So will it be a risk for us, or it will increase our risk with having more homeless people in town?
Yeah, again, I think that's probably for officers to answer around how they manage those contracts and that strategies and the whole way that you deal with homelessness for Boston.
No, I think we're going off the track here, so I'm going to forget about that question at the moment, Councillor Danny, because we're talking about assurances and we're talking about homeless, and I'm not really sure whether we're on the right meeting here. So let's put that to aside for the time being, and we'll move on. Is there any more questions before we move on? Right, I'm going to take you to page 168, everybody, because this is the Chief Executive's summary, and I'm going to say something now. If you read the summary from the Chief Executive, he says here, levels of assurance sit lower than we would ideally seek. However, it is recognised as a smaller council that impacts of external factors are harder to withstand. Our levels of assurance remain sufficient whilst identifying areas of focus for me and leadership colleagues. My question is, how are we going to overcome these? What solutions have we got in place? And I think sufficient is not good enough. I'd like to know that we need some better assurance, because sufficient to me is not sufficient. And I just think that statement there doesn't fill me with much confidence. So I'd like that question to be answered, not by anybody here. I'd like that to go on the action point, and somebody can take that up for me as the chairman of this committee to see what the outcome is from the Chief Executive's summary. Right, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Let's have a quick look at where we are then. So the committee reviews the Combined Assurance Status Report 2024-25, text appendix 1, seeks to assure itself that the findings illustrate that the assurance framework is operating effectively as part of the Council's corporate governance arrangements. Do we have a proposer, please? Councillor Danny, seconder? Councillor Scoot. All in favour? Here, good. Carried. Moved on. Item 7 is the internal audit plan, and I'm going to ask Matthew to present that to us.
Thank you, Chair. I think starting on page 192. So this is our annual internal audit plan, our risk-based internal audit plan. On page 192 there, we just give you some background around the internal audit team. So you've got, again, for 25-26, you've got a very experienced, qualified internal audit team that will be delivering your audits. In the paragraph below that, we just confirm that we do conform with internal audit standards. And then at the top of the second column, that we're not aware of any conflicts of interest from any members of the team on why we can't work on your audits at Boston.
Okay.
And then from page 194 is where we set out our intent and our areas to review. I think what we're looking at is to keep up with the pace of change and risks that might occur during the year. The Q1 audits have been agreed and are in process. I think in terms of your Q3 and Q4 audits, that the plan is flexible. So as we have further discussions with the senior management team, and as there's likely to be new risks arising for Boston throughout the year, we can change that plan. And of course, any changes that we do will come back to this committee so you can see that. But I think this is our intent at the moment, but we do build in flexibility so that we can keep up to date and keep up to speed of where risks might occur during the year, Chair. And I'm happy to take it. I think just quickly as well, I know there's been some comments tonight about risk registers. So that's one of the areas we're looking at in Q1. Cyber security, there's been some comments around that tonight. Again, we're looking at that in Q1. And I think obviously there's a lot of audits in here that should relate to your high risks, but I think a lot of them relate to the comments we've been getting tonight. So I hope there's some assurance from members that we're looking in the right areas. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthew. Are there any questions from anybody on the committee? No? So I think that's all taken as read. So I just want to say that there's no comments. So the committee is asked to note that, and we're happy for that to be moved. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's go on to item 8. This is the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, RIPA 2000, an update. It's going to be presented to us by Donna. Welcome back.
Thank you. So this report, which starts on page 199, is the annual update for members, excuse me, on activity carried out by the council under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, which is also known as RIPA. The Act provides the statutory framework that regulates the use of powers by public authorities to carry out surveillance activities. Our RIPA activity is overseen by the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office, and we're required to submit an annual return to them. And I can confirm that our return in January, which related to last year's activity, was a nil return, same as the previous. That means that no covert activities were carried out under the meaning of directed surveillance under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. Members will be aware that we have got a policy in place for RIPA that was adopted by Boston Council in February last year. And the report also mentions that work is being undertaken to develop 2 new policies. Those will be on body-worn cameras and also the use of CCTV. And I anticipate that officers who are working on those currently, they'll be bringing them forward to members a little later this year. So that concludes the report. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
I'll give you the first one then. On page 202, on the conclusion, there's been no audit undertaken by IPCO since the last update for the committee, which was in autumn 2023. That's nearly 2 years ago. So why not? There's a question I'm asking there. And on the second one, 7.2, it talks about the activity by the 3 councils, again, 2 years since there was anything happening there. So can you give us an update on why that is? Don't we do these annually or 6 monthly, or do we not bother at all? I mean, what's the situation?
The audits that are carried out by IPCO, so they determine the frequency of those. That's like the government department that regulates how public authorities undertake these activities. So we're governed by them. I think certainly they were satisfied with our last audit. I would anticipate that we would have a further one this year.
Yeah, I mean, are we satisfied that that's sufficient, or is it too long a wait for another one to turn up? I mean, where do we stand on that? I mean, I know you say they dictate it, but I mean, 2 years is a long time to wait for some information to come out from an audit, isn't it?
Thank you, Chair. I think because I think there's some assurance, because as a public authority we're not frequently undertaking surveillance activities. So with a nil return, so what we do is obviously we will consider any kind of investigatory activities. We'll weigh up whether they would fall within the scope of RIPA. For us to undertake surveillance under RIPA, we would now be required to go to a magistrate's court for authorisation. So there are some very significant steps that we would need to take to get to that point of actually undertaking covert surveillance.
Okay, I just need to understand the situation there, and you've explained it to me now. It wasn't easy to understand on this paper, so I'm just asking that question because I need to understand why it's a 2-year wait or a 2-year gap. But you've answered the question for me. Councillor Austin.
Just as a matter of information, I'm interested to hear this about the body-worn cameras. To what extent are we do any of our staff wear body-worn cameras? And is it an increasing issue?
Thank you. So I'm not aware that many staff are currently using body-worn cameras. We're looking to get a policy in place that will govern how they are used more formally. And really that will be around sort of the number of reasons really why we're looking at using that. So an obvious explanation would be obviously the protection of our staff, particularly when they're in confrontational situations. But also body-worn video cameras are quite useful for gathering evidence as well when the officers are undertaking investigatory activities. So there's a number of sort of reasons why we are exploring that.
Put your microphone on.
It's a matter of exploration at the moment rather than actually happening on a wide scale.
I can only really speak on behalf of my own services. So they're not currently in use within a number of the services that I'm responsible for, such as licensing and environmental health. We do have some officers that are working under contract for the council that do use them. So, for example, for environmental enforcement, you may have seen those using those, and they do work very effectively.
Okay, Councillor Gilbert.
Last question, I think. About 18 months ago, we prosecuted a number of people for fly tipping at the recycling areas in Boston. They were identified, I think, by CCTV through use of the number plate recognition system. I just wonder, was that covered by RIPA or not?
I think the cameras that you're talking about wouldn't have fallen under RIPA because they weren't covert. So they were overt. So they were quite clearly, there was big signs. They were obviously quite visible to the public. The public would have known that they were being recorded.
Just go on to Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just really wanted to come back on paragraph 7.2 because I asked a very similar question as another authority about exactly the same paper last month, and I can't actually remember if you were there or not. But the reply I had was much along the same lines. There haven't been the sort of interventions that would require RIPA authority, and that there were other more effective measures that you have in place that don't require a magistrate to sign off on. And that was the reason I think given across all three councils. I don't know if that helps in any way.
Sorry, did what say?
I don't know if that helps in any way.
I'm sure it does. Anybody else want to ask any questions? Can I just take you to page 204, Donna, on the risk management there, the paragraph there. You're sort of giving us some concern about being exposed, and we get a sort of a little bit of comfort halfway down the actual paragraph. So are you happy with what that says there? Is it giving us the comfort that we want on risk management to all those things there? 204 risk management bit.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's accurate, and I think it is something certainly that we do take seriously as an authority in terms of how we would use RIPA. Obviously, we're aware of our responsibilities to IPCO, so I think that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm just concerned that risk nowadays is getting greater and greater for everybody, whether it's a business, a council or whatever. And I think there's as much tightness as we can have and there's much controls and mechanisms in place to make sure that we keep this under wraps and control is probably not what it's all about really. So I just need that assurance that we've got that happening here. Okay, anybody else want to ask a question? If not, we're going to move on. One more quickly.
My question, I know that we use our CCTV cameras for other towns and villages. How happy are they with our services?
I'm afraid I can't comment on the CCTV. I'm sort of covering for Christian Allen today to present the RIPA side of it, so I wouldn't be able to answer that question, unfortunately. Thank you.
Well done, the action list. Okay, thank you. Right, so members are invited to note reporting. We've done that. Comment is appropriate. Do we have a proposer, please? Are we noting it, are we? Oh, sorry. I'm on the wrong one. No, it isn't. It says here we've got to have a proposer. Stop sticking your oar in. Thank you very much, Councillor Gilbert. Proposed seconder, please. Councillor Austin. You're on the wrong page. We'll move to the vote. All in favour? Great, thank you very much. Right, we'll go to item 9, which is the work programme. Page 207 of the pack. The committee is asked to note and comment on this. Is everyone happy to take this as noted? Comments have been recorded by officers. And it actually concludes basically what we've done today, isn't it, really? And I think the new one will come out when we have the new year from May onwards. Right, can I just say to everybody, thank you very much for this evening. Oh, sorry, Suzanne wants to speak.
I just wanted to mention, we talked about having some time together to go through the risks line by line. I don't know if that can be added to the work programme and whether you'd prefer to have a separate meeting. So we have done it in the past where we've done it before a meeting, but I think we wouldn't have as much time if we did it before a meeting. It might be nice to have, if you indulge me and spend that time, to go through it together at a separate meeting, if you want to feed that into the future work programme.
No, I think it's important that we do have that, because the risk that you're presenting to us, to me, is not detailed enough, and it just gives numbers and highs and lows and mediums, and I'd like to see a bit more, quantitative information and a little bit more sort of what we're doing behind the scenes to get it kept under control or bringing it down or whatever. So yeah, that could go on the work programme. That's fine. So just that concludes the business. Can I thank you all for coming this evening and for your time. Sorry it took so long, but we started at 6 and I want to go for my tea. So safe journey home, everybody, and good luck to Matthew in his new role at SK. NK, well, just got your promotion then, didn't it? Just give us a minute while they take the recording off. Thank you.